Great.
Okay, this is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD Joshua Polachek. He is running for the Arizona State Utilities Commission. How are you today, Joshua?
I'm doing very well, and thank you for explaining it that way. We have such a funny name, the Arizona Corporation Commission. People think that we have some sort of we're like the Federal Trade Commission or the Securities and Exchange Commission. And though we do have a little bit of role similar to those federal regulators, the main way that we impact the day-to-day lives of the citizens in my state here in Arizona is that we oversee the entire utility or investor-owned utility sector. And so everything from your month-to-month bill to where the power plants and the transmission lines go to the long-term plans that the utilities have for getting electricity to the people of our state.
What other duties are there besides overseeing the utilities and the rates? What other duties does the commission serve?
Well, I think with the recent national news in East Palestine, with the rail derailment, a really important function of the commission. The commission was founded because the founders of the Arizona State Constitution, or the framers of the Arizona State Constitution, did not believe that the typical methods of power to oversee the monopolies were sufficient. So they wanted to create a constitutional body within the state to oversee those monopolies. And what were the monopolies in 1912? It was the railways and the telegraph companies. And so my commission still has a very important role to play in railway safety. And as we saw in East Palestine, when the railway safety regulators are asleep at the wheel, you have really horrific consequences for the people in that state. And Arizona just got lucky. There was a major derailment right outside of our third largest city, Flagstaff, and it happened just a few miles outside of town. If that derailment had happened a little closer to town, it could have been another East Palestine. And that's solely on the responsibility of the Arizona Corporation Commission for failing to do its duty as a railway safety regulator. The commission also is responsible for some actual things where people think of like the FTC or the SEC. So it is responsible for corporate registration, and they oversee on the civil side, the Attorney General does the criminal side for securities regulation here in our state. And so we have seen all too many times the most vulnerable members of Arizona society, generally people who are elders, who are trusting a fraudulent scheme with their life savings, their retirement savings. And the Corporation Commission, under the current Republican leadership, has just not done enough to protect the people, the most vulnerable members of Arizona society, against people who are predators and looking just to take advantage of them.
Then who do you see the current commission protecting if it were not the constituents?
The current commission appears to be protecting the very industries, and that includes the predatory financial people that it's supposed to be regulating. And so, for example, we just had over a $500 million rate increase after having just had a rate increase a year ago for the largest utility in the state. So a year ago, the utility is supposed to put in a rate increase and make a plan for the next several years. And instead, they immediately went back into the rate increase process and asked for yet another one. They see that there's a corporation commission, a utilities commission that is what we call regulatory capture. So it has been captured by the very industries that it is and the very entities that it is supposed to be regulating. And when those entities control their regulators, it means that they can go out and say, hey, why don't we try to maximize our profit? And where does that profit come? It comes from the people of the state of Arizona.
Do you know the current commission members? Are they receiving donations? Are they getting any remuneration from these corporations, from these utilities that they're regulating?
So I often get the question, why are the corporate commissioners making these decisions that seem to go contrary to the constitutional duty of the commission, contrary to the promises that they made on the campaign trail, and contrary to the best interest of the people of Arizona. And unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. People try to look at campaign donations. I do know that in 2022, the Republicans put a former gas lobbyist, literally his last job with the gas utility, the natural gas utility in the state, was as a lobbyist. Since the MAGA majority took control of the commission, they have hired a former coal company president and former Koch Energy Services executive as the senior policy advisor to the commission. The chair of the commission tried to run to control the Arizona Republican Party on a platform of election denial. So when people ask me why is this happening, I don't have an answer for them. You're going to have to try to ask the people in the Arizona Republican Party, not the voters, because the voters themselves, they're suffering. It doesn't matter if you're red, purple, or blue, you are suffering from the decisions of the Corporation Commission. The Corporation Commission is failing the people of Arizona and selling us out to the interests of out-of-state investors who see Arizona as a piggy bank that they can break open and pick over our bones. But why the commissioners are doing this, I just can't get into the psychology of my opponents. And it goes not just to the current commissioners, but to the people running to join the commission on the Republican side. We have had in debates, my Republican opponents say things like, we need to make sure that this is the right investment environment so that out-of-state investors will maximize their returns from investing in the Arizona utilities market. They have said things like, I appreciate rate increases. They have said things like, it doesn't matter what's cheapest for the people of Arizona. We need to keep using coal. And they say these things in public. Imagine what they're saying in private.
The current commissioners, were they elected?
Yes, all of them have been elected. One of my opponents was originally appointed 5 years ago, but she did win election in her own right in 2020, and now she's running for re-election for her second and final term. And we have to make sure that she has one term and that's it. And so that's Leah Peterson. I'm also running against Renee Lopez, who is a former city council member, and Rachel Walden, who is a Mesa School Board member and a member of a group associated with Moms for Liberty called Purple Arizona. One thing you see in common on the Republican side, as opposed to the Democratic side, is most of my opponents are failed congressional candidates. And so they lost in the primary because they weren't MAGA enough. And so what they've decided to do is they're going to run for this placeholder office and then likely try to run for Congress again the next time a seat opens up. So these are career politicians who are railing against the very constitutional government that they are running to represent. On the Democratic side, you have three citizen leaders, a current NASA scientist and engineer in Jonathan Hill, a water advocate and clean air advocate in Elenia Aguilar, and myself, Joshua Polachek. I'm a retired Foreign Service officer, meaning a retired diplomat for the United States.
The commission, the current commission, when they, I don't know if in Illinois there are campaign and disclosures every 3 months. You have to disclose what the expenditures are, what the receipts are for the committee that you are using to run a campaign. What is it like in Arizona?
So in Arizona, we have a process where we have publicly funded elections that you can opt into as a candidate. All of the Republicans have opted into that, but we also have what's known as coordinated party expenditures, where donors can give unlimited amounts of money to a state or county party in Arizona, that money can be spent to support a candidate and does not have to be reported as support for that candidate. It's just going as support for the Maricopa Republican Party or the Arizona Republican Party. And so our understanding is that most of the support for our opponents is being done through the party system, and where they can say, "Oh, look, we have clean hands," but then they are getting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars directed to the political parties, earmarked to be spent in support of them in the race.
Is there any paper trail about how much the party is spending for these candidates?
Yeah, that paper trail doesn't exist. It goes into the broader paper trail of the state party is spending money on electioneering, and then you would have to go through and under each line item and figuring out what the ad buy that they made for each individual ad buy and see which candidate it was in support of. In addition, when they do get out the vote efforts, that can be spread just across all candidates and doesn't have to be particularly focused on one race. But while they're doing those get out the vote efforts, they can say, make sure that you vote for the three people in this race. And so it's really hard to do a paper trail of where the money is flowing in our state because of the changes to our campaign finance laws. We do see though that we have changed our laws so that independent groups, these super PACs that people hear of, or we call them independent expenditure organizations in Arizona, they now have to disclose. But again, the issue that we're seeing is that in many cases, what's going on is so-called voter education rather than electioneering.
What about you? Are you funded by donors, or is the Democratic Party also helping you?
It's a combination. I have a broad base of individual donors. Part of the reason that I decided to run traditionally funded is because I'm a retired union member, and I wanted to make sure that my union family, my union brothers, sisters, and non-binary siblings could express their support for me. And so not quite the majority, but almost the majority of my funds are coming from either union members or unions themselves, union action, like the member action committees, I think as they're called. And so that's the reason that I chose to run a traditionally funded campaign, is because I wanted the organized labor to have an opportunity to express their support in a very concrete way.
Mm. Do you know if organized labor ever supported previous candidates that ran against the Republicans?
Yes, they have. But they did that support independently, and with the changes in campaign finance laws, this is a way for them to directly coordinate and support me.
So do you have enough money to run? Do you have what is it like campaigning versus the Republicans now?
Well, it would always be nicer to not have to worry about money. But the people of Arizona, individuals who are, I have people at events come up and they give me $5 and they say, please help us out. At this point, we are we're pretty happy with how things are going. We think it's going to be a neck and neck race. And in that situation, it's not money that gets people out, it's the human connection. And so yesterday, I put 525 miles on my car. I went from uh, Tucson to South Phoenix, to Prescott to Tempe, and had campaign events and worked to just build those human connections and make sure that people not only themselves are supporting, but they're going out and they're talking to their friends and neighbors, their family, if they're still talking to their family. And even talk to your enemies about this, because this is a race that impacts your month to month existence. Every single person in this state is impacted somehow by the decisions of the Corporation Commission. And it's both that short term, that bill you get every single month, which just keeps going up, and the affordability and the reliability just keeps going down. Um, and on the long term. Arizona is on the verge of making a transition to a 21st century grid. And that can either be a grid that continues to be powered by fossil fuels that we have to import from out of state. Currently, we spend over almost $5 billion a year, and we're sending that to other states, and even some of that money is going overseas to buy $500 million in coal and $4.5 billion, billion with a B, of natural gas, primarily methane, to power our grid, to keep the
From
water pumps running, the AC at a safe and affordable level, and the lights on. And that is money that leaves our state and we never see it again.
from
Arizona, yeah, go ahead.
they're going overseas to buy using $4.5 billion from what country? Do you know?
Well, so that $4.5 billion is bought off the global commodity market for natural gas. And so it just depends on where the supplier is getting their supplies of wholesale natural gas at that point. Um, a lot of it is domestic U.S. production, but there are other sources, and it's because it's a global commodities market. Even if we're getting our gas from, say, Pennsylvania, if the price spikes because, say, for example, there's a conflict in the Persian Gulf, or Russia invades one of its neighbors in Eastern Europe, that's going to cause a price spike, and the supplier in Pennsylvania will decide, well, do we want to ship it to Arizona, or do we want to, send it into the international commodities market? And so we're staking our energy future. And I want people nationally to understand the energy future in Arizona. If the water pumps don't run and the AC is not at an affordable level, people will die in this state. This is a state where water is life, and electricity is foundational. And for us, I do not want to bet our future on a unstable global commodities market that is subject to the whims of dictators in Eastern Europe and the Persian Gulf. I'd like us to achieve energy independence for our state. As your viewers can see, we got a lot of sunshine in this state. It is almost November, and we're having 90-degree temperatures still. We have 320 plus days of sunshine. And Arizona as an opportunity, if we make the investments now, to achieve energy independence within 10 to 15 years.
So that means solar is the best because of the abundant sunshine in Arizona.
Well, yes, it also happens to be the cheaper option.
Right.
And,
And
and this is something that I don't understand. People ask me, well, if it's cheaper, why are your opponents leaning on the utilities to continue to spend billions of dollars in fossil fuel infrastructure? And uh, what I don't understand, as a consumer and not just as a candidate, when you spend those billions of dollars in infrastructure, if a utility is directed by the commission to spend that money, the utility gets that money back from the consumers with a 10% profit tacked on top of it. So I don't understand, they're spending our money there through the utilities. They're saying, okay, utilities go and build these billions of dollars of new gas plants, these new fossil fuel plants, spend billions of dollars to build a new pipeline to increase our capacity. And then not only are we going to be on the hook for the annual bill, the annual gas bill, the billions of dollars of annual gas bills, we're going to be on the hook for paying off that infrastructure for decades.
well, is it
They, yeah, they have directed one of the utilities to build a new gas plant that will come online in 2038, and it has a 50-year depreciation. That means until 2088, the consumers in Arizona in that service area are going to be paying off that piece of infrastructure.
well, is it just suppliers and special interest, the people who are going to benefit from building the infrastructure, are they funding this plan so that they get the profit? Maybe the commission is making money by helping their friends get these contracts to build. Maybe that's why they're doing all this infrastructure and getting all these contracts to help the friends.
I mean, somebody is making billions of dollars off the people of Arizona. I think one thing that will be very interesting is as these MAGA people roll off of the commission, see what they're doing next. See what they're, see where the butter is being, where the butter is coming from. Because this is technically a part-time position, um, one of my or one of the current commissioners continues to do corporate consulting. Can you imagine if you were a large multinational company, and you could go to the Federal Trade Commission, and one of the members of the commission were a corporate consultant, and you could hire their consultancy to help you do risk analysis, or business prospecting. It's really the level of corruption that's happening in the state it runs deep, and it's against the people of Arizona. The people in my state deserve better.
Let's give our listeners an idea of what these rate hikes entail. How much are the people having to pay monthly as a result of these increases, and the businesses too? How much do they have to pay uh, monthly
Right.
more?
Well, and that's a great thing you brought up, because this impacts, yes, it impacts people in their homes, but this also impacts small businesses. It impacts schools. It impacts large businesses. It impacts people's decision on whether or not to come to Arizona, and really grow our economy, and making an economy that is a 21st century economy for all Arizonans. Um, so I was just at the border of what is today? Today's Monday, so I was there Saturday. Sorry, I have had spent about 1,000 miles on my car in the last 72 hours. Arizona's a big state. I knew that emotionally, but I don't think I knew it viscerally until I got into this race. I put nearly 20,000 miles on my car. So I was speaking to a woman in Nogales, Arizona, which is a border community here. And she was saying that she had a $400 electricity bill in September. And she's like, "Oh, I'm used to having multi-hundred-dollar bills in the heat of the summer in July and August. But usually my bill is like, 100, $150. She had a $400 bill in September because there was about half the days were over 100 degrees in September. She's expecting a $300 bill for her October bill because we had 15 days over 100 in October. Um, and this is not somebody with a 5,000 square foot mansion. This is somebody with a 1,400 square foot house. And to put poison on top of this exploitation Sunday, there was a program where the utilities would help consumers make their homes more efficient, to put in insulation, to have heat pumps and more efficient air conditioning appliances, and where the savings, the utility would sort of credit you future savings to help you buy, to make these investments in utilities. And it's a win-win. The utility doesn't have to spend money to build expensive infrastructure. There's less demand on the grid, and the consumer gets a lower bill. And of course, it helps the climate because we're not burning as much fossil fuel to power the grid. That program was killed by the current MAGA majority on the commission in the spring. And I was speaking to somebody who she's part of the governance committee of a Presbyterian church, and they were deep into the process of of permitting. They'd already hired some construction engineers and everything. It was a multi $10,000 project that was going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars of electricity over the next 20 years. And they were about to do the final agreement with the utility, and the utility's like, "Oh, sorry, the commission canceled this program, and you're out of luck." Um, and it's just not right. Like the smart policy decisions are being um, are being poisoned by the current commission. And I do want to talk about businesses. In Western Arizona, there was a pretty large rate increase, over 10%, that was put in place by the commission in late spring. But it was 12% for the entire year. So that meant in the peak summer periods, people were seeing bills that were 18, 20, 30% higher than they had the previous summer. And there's an independent movie theater in Lake Havasu City that was getting $12,000 electricity bills in September, over $15,000 bills during the summer peak period, and they might have to close down because of that, and they might only be open seasonally. Can you imagine that, you're a kid, one of the few things in town for fun, when it's because they had 50 consecutive days over 120 degrees, not over 100, not over 110, over 120 degrees. And where's a nice place to escape the heat? You go into the movie theater, you see a nice something, a nice piece of action film or a family comedy, and you've got that cool AC and your super jug of soda and your popcorn. And they might have to close for the summer next year because of this rate increase.
So 18 to 20% over what they were paying before then, as a
Right, over
result
last
of
summer,
the
yeah. And it's going to equal out over the year. But if you're a business and you have a seasonal price that increases almost 25%, and it's not like you're a movie theater and you can say, oh, well, we're not going to run the AC, right? That's a fixed cost. You have to run the air conditioning. It's a safety issue.
And what was the previous increase? So this was 18 to 20%. When was the previous increase, and then how long did that one last?
Well, this is this is one of the things that's been happening. These rate increases typically had been happening every say 5 to 8 years, depending on the utility. So I can't give you it. There's lots of different utilities in the state, but typically it's about half a decade between rate increases. Under the current commission, with the regulatory capture that's going on, they are going for rate increases every 12 to 18 months because they're trying to, if they lock this rate increase in, it is for decades. And so they're trying to lock in their profits now. In addition, there have been these adjustments where, as the price of coal or the price of gas has gone up, they go and they ask for an adjustment, and their operating expenses are being covered by the people of Arizona. And
And
so
then,
it's, yeah, go ahead.
and if the gas prices, their supply costs go down, their rates don't go down; they stay the same high.
Well, the rates stay the same, yes. They are supposed to come and give an adjustment and say, oh, well, the rates went down, so we'll give you, or the cost went down, so we'll give you $5 or $6 back on your bill. And you have been seeing utilities trumpeting like, oh, well, we gave people some refunds. And in some cases, because some of these refunds are coming because the efficiency program was canceled, the money that was going to be spent on efficiency, which would have had a long-term decrease in demand and therefore a long-term decrease in the base rate, instead was given back as a one-time refund, because these efficiency costs were so-called refunded to the consumer. But all that it had is the money that was supposed to be invested in efficiency was instead uh, uh, presented as a refund.
Have you spoken with commissions in other states? Do they do other states face similar problems in their utility commissions?
Oh, well, 100% that the challenges that Arizona faces, we just happen to be at the forefront of that because climate change impacts Arizona before every other state or territory in the United States. So um, the other 52, or I should say, the other 51 commissions, so DC, Puerto Rico, and the other 49 states, they face similar challenges to us. But what has been so disappointing to me in a purple state where we have such a history of coming together and working on important public infrastructure, the largest public infrastructure project in human history took place in Arizona when we built the Central Arizona Project to bring water from the Colorado to Phoenix and Tucson. We are a state that is famous for putting politics aside, not playing politics with our essential utilities, and instead building what is necessary for life, for human life in the desert. That seems to have broken down. And we are seeing commissions in deep red states and purple states and in blue states take that leadership and really set the foundation for taking their state into the 21st century. Wyoming, one of the most famous, deepest red states in the country, is about to be 100% clean energy. They are about to build enough wind capacity in that state to power 1 million households. And I'm not going to, make a demand on your listeners. There are fewer than 250,000 households in Wyoming. They are building enough wind capacity for everyone in that state and then enough excess to be able to export and turn Wyoming into a net energy exporter, a net electricity exporter. Minnesota is reforming their regulations to increase the amount of wind and solar on their grid and move towards energy independence in the next couple of decades. Nevada, which was in a very similar place to Arizona a quarter century ago, where Arizona was one of the first adopters moving towards this path towards energy independence from clean energy. We were first in the nation in a lot of this. And we stalled out at about 6% of our grid was coming from utility scale clean energy. Nevada changed their rules, changed some of their accounting. They went from 4% to almost 52% of their grid. So the majority of their grid, if you count solar, battery storage, and hydroelectric power together, the majority of Nevada's grid comes from clean energy sources that Nevada controls. And that happened within a decade. When people say, "Oh, it's going to take forever. How are we going to make that transition?" Nevada has shown the rest of the country that this can happen quickly, it can happen affordably, and it can secure your economic and energy future for decades to come. And when we talk about these one-time rates going down because the price of natural gas goes down, Nevada is lowering their base rates because it is so much cheaper to produce energy through clean energy. Can you imagine your electricity rates? You use the same amount of electricity and your rates going down year on year because the utility has made investments in the technology, 21st century technology that's more affordable, more reliable, and cleaner, and doesn't have the national security and climate change negative impacts that fossil fuels do.
What color state is Nevada?
Nevada's a very purple state. It's like Arizona. But they happen to have an appointed utilities commission, and they have had governors from both parties. I want to give credit to both parties in Nevada, where they've appointed commissioners who see their job as what's in the best long-term interest of Nevadans, and not what's in the best long-term interest of the out-of-state investors that own Nevada Power.
Who is in charge of regulating the Corporation Commission in Arizona?
The people of Arizona.
That's it. So if they were, of course, they could vote to change the commission, but as for their practices, the only way to stop them from misusing the funds would be for them to be voted out. There are no other arms of government to appeal to, except maybe the courts?
Right. So our Attorney General, that's a great question. Our Attorney General is currently suing the commission for some of their recent decisions. But that's a open constitutional question in Arizona because the commission and the Attorney General are constitutionally co-equal. And so the courts are going to have to sort that out. The commission appears, at least to me, to have pretty flagrantly violated their constitutional duties, but they are an elected political body, and the courts may rule that that is within their electoral prerogative to decide to violate their constitutional role.
What was the
And the courts have recently been packed in Arizona. So we used to have a 5-member Supreme Court, and the previous Republican governor saw the way the winds were blowing and decided to pack the court. And we now have a 7-member Supreme Court with a strong, with a 4-3 MAGA majority. And it's playing out everywhere from business regulations to reproductive freedom. So the reinstitution of the 18th century, or sorry, the 1800s abortion ban came along a 4-3 Supreme Court vote, and 2 of the 4 people on the side, the anti-freedom side, were in newly created Supreme Court positions that came about because the Republican majority, the Republican governor saw the power slipping, and he wanted to lock in his power for decades to come. So with this 4-3 Supreme Court, it's impossible to predict what they'll do in this case between the Attorney General and the Corporation Commission.
when the governor what did he do with the Supreme Court? Did he create new seats, or did he
Yep.
just appoint? He did.
Yep, he created new
was
seats,
okay.
both
So
on the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals.
okay. So what were the prior number of seats, and what are the current number of seats for both?
There were 5 seats, and now there's 7.
And he has the constitutional power to do that without having the legislature to vote yes on his.
So this was done in the last years of the Ducey administration, which ran from 2014 to 2022. And there's been a Republican majority in the state legislature for decades. And the Republican majority in the state legislature and Governor Ducey collaborated together to pack the courts because they saw that their power was slipping. There's a 1-seat majority for the Republicans in the state House and the state Senate. They've already lost the governorship to Governor Katie Hobbs, a Democrat. She won in 2022. To Trump's hand-picked successor to Doug Ducey, Kari Lake, who I think some people have heard of. She claims to still be the governor, and she's also running for the Senate right now. And so they realize that one of the ways to lock in their power, instead of moving towards the center and compromising and trying to figure out how Arizona can be governed as a purple state where Democrats and Republicans work together, elected Democrats and Republicans work together, because at the neighborhood level, people work together in this state. This is not a state where people are so driven by partisanship. Neighbors work together. We have a lot of rural electrical co-ops where it doesn't matter what your party affiliation is. You just want to keep the lights on. But at the elected level, there's really on the Republican side, the party and the elected leadership are drawing battle lines. Instead of doing the business of their state, they're doing the business of their party. And so one of the ways to lock in that power was to do court packing.
What was the voter turnout in the last election when these commissioners were voted in?
So in the midterms, so we elect our commissioners. I'm sorry to get so nerdy with your listeners. So it's a 5-member commission. On presidential years, 3 of the commissioners are elected. So that's the race that I'm in right now. In midterm years, 2 commissioners are elected. And that's when we saw real cultural change at the commission in 2022. There were two MAGA people who were running for the commission, and they successfully convinced voters like, oh, it's okay to split tickets. We're a normal Republican. And they really hid their MAGA bona fides from the voters in 2022. And as soon as they got into office, they started taking junkets to New York, paid for by Wall Street. They started repealing our standards for efficiency and for energy independence. And they started approving every single rate case that came across their desk. And so right now there are three seats up for control. And if myself, my two running mates, Eleni Aguilar and Jonathan Hill, if the three of us can win, we can take back the commission and deliver it back to its core constitutional responsibility of serving the people of Arizona.
If we know how the voter turnout was in the last.
Oh, sorry, voter turnout. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I think voter turnout in the midterms was in the high 70%, and we're expecting this year Arizona to break voter turnout records. And it's really important that people get out and vote. Because we know that there are a lot of people in the MAGA camp who are deeply motivated to vote right now. And there are a lot of people, whether you are a progressive, a centrist Democrat, or a what I would call a pro-Constitution Republican or independent. We have a broad coalition here in Arizona that is pro-freedom, pro-citizen, that wants affordability and just to put all this nonsense politics aside and get down to the business of our state. But we are facing a very dedicated enemy. They're well trained, they're well motivated, and we need to make sure that at the ballot box, there are more of us than there are of them.
How
And we're
hard
expecting record voter turnouts, maybe even going back to the early 1900s in Arizona before we were a state.
how hard is it to reach voters, and what is the population density like, and where are most of the voters? Where do you concentrate your efforts to educate the voters about what's happening?
Well, as I said, I put almost 20,000 miles on my car. I've been to every county in this state. And I talk to voters no matter where they are. I grew up all across the rural West, including in rural Arizona. My my father served in the Indian Health Service as a commissioned a physician with in federal service, and so I spent my childhood going to schools on reservations for all of my elementary school. I've my formative years were in the rural West. And so I make sure that I spend my time in rural Arizona as much as I spend my time in the suburbs and the cities. And so we are out there everywhere. I am driving myself. I'm this is a shoestring campaign, so I don't have the same benefit and the same level of support that say a U.S. Senate candidate can have, or I don't have a pilot's license like Senator Kelly does. And so I'm driving myself to all these different places. But if you look on my social media, uh, whether it's my Instagram or the platform formerly known as Twitter, you'll see that I am out there across the state. Just yesterday, I was in 4 different places doing events. I was at the border on Saturday. I've got I think I have something like 15 different towns or cities that I'm going to be at before Election Day. My schedule is completely out of my head at this point. But we go, whether it is a county fair and we go to the pie bake off, whether it's a big rally for Democrats, whether it's a Kiwanis Club, a Chamber of Commerce event, we go to where the voters are because I see my job is to represent the people of Arizona. I'm not there to take power and to tell the voters how to live. My job is to represent them, hear what their problems are, and try to solve those problems. That's why we get elected to government, not because we're. It appears that my Republican friends that I'm running against appear purely interested in the power and not in the responsibility.
What was the percentage of election returns like of Republican versus Democrats in the last uh, midterm, when those two candidates were elected?
Yeah, it was very close. It out of over 3 million votes cast, it came down to tens of thousands of votes that separated the two Republicans and the two Democrats. And
Mhm.
so we're talking about 1 to 2% in either direction. Um, and it's really important for people to understand the power of their vote. This is a slightly complicated election because it is a statewide election where you get 3 votes, and the top 3 vote getters are the ones that are elected. And so one of the things that we've been really stressing to people on the ground is making sure that they understand the power of three, that they vote for all 3 Democrats, because if the three of us don't win, then whoever does win is going to be in the minority. So even if 2 of the 3 of us win, they're still going to be facing a hardcore MAGA majority on the commission. And even if the MAGA majority only has a 1 seat majority, they're going to pretend like they have all 5 seats on the commission.
You mean like
Majority rules.
you mean that if there were even one Republican in the commission, they'll still be a
No,
thorn in the side.
no,
Is
so because the Republicans have 2 seats that aren't up for reelection until
that it? Yes,
2026, if
yes.
they win one of the 3 seats this cycle,
Mhm.
they are
The
going to
other
have
majority.
they're going to still have a 3 or 4 seat majority on the commission, and they'll act like they have all 5 seats.
What is it currently now? How many Republicans and how many Democrats?
4 Republicans and 1 Democrat.
Mhm.
And they so of the 3 commissioners up for reelection, the 1 Democrat and one of the Republicans is not running for reelection, and then one of the Republicans, she is running for reelection. So she's one of my opponents.
Mhm. So the Democrat is no longer running for re-election then, or
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, she has another position. Arizona recently created an office of lieutenant governor, and she is likely going to be appointed as our first lieutenant governor starting in January. And that's not news that just came out. I'm not giving you a scoop or anything. That came out this week, that she's likely going to be appointed as our first lieutenant governor starting in January. So with that, you can't hold both positions because they are constitutionally co-equal positions. So she couldn't have stayed on the commission and been lieutenant governor, and she decided not to run for reelection.
what is the effect of the outcome of this election on the rest of the nation? Is there any how would it affect the rest of the nation, would you say?
Well, if Democrats can win on an agenda of pro-consumer, regulatory reform, and really making the generation market work, we have an opportunity to show not just the U.S. but the entire world how under a small d democratic system, with a that's well regulated and has elements of the free market, that we can make the energy transition to independence, towards energy independence through clean energy in a way that's affordable, reliable, and sustainable, and where we secure our energy and economic freedom for decades to come. I'm at my friend's house, and he's got his little puppy came in and wants to hear more about the interview. Um, and so if Arizona can do it, if Arizona can show that under uh, a a well or a capitalist system that has good elected oversight, um, that we can achieve this energy independence through clean energy, the rest of the country and potentially even the rest of the world can follow our example. And so I would say that obviously, the race to the White House is going to have huge impacts for our energy and climate future. But I think there can be a really strong argument that this is the second most important energy and climate election in the entire country in 2024.
Let's say the three Democrats did win.
Yeah.
What would you be able to do? Would you be able to change those rate hikes, or not until the next rate hike? What are you able to do for the people if you were to start the clean energy program? It would take a while to implement, and then you only have about how many years in office when until you have to run again, and you
Yeah.
have to keep your office in order to keep that the plan going, because if not, then if the Republicans came in, they could just dismantle the program and go back to their old ways.
Well, so this is the funny thing. What we are doing, so if we're elected and we have 4 years of control of the commission, there are going to be major capital investments that are going to be made. We are looking at an energy demand in Arizona growing almost 40% in the next decade, decade and a half. The investment decisions, the capital allocation decisions are being made in the next 4 years. And if we can set the policy so that that capital is invested in clean energy and energy independence, the utilities, if the commission changes and say, oh no, you have to pull back that investment and invest in something else, the utilities will tell the commission to go pound sand. If the money is spent and the investments are made and have been approved through the offices of the commission of a majority of duly elected people on the commission, a future commission can't reverse those capital allocation decisions. And so we are really looking at locking in a future that's affordable and reliable and energy independent. And this is the do or die period right now. It is the next 4 years where we're talking about tens of billions of dollars are going to be invested either to achieve energy independence and affordability through clean energy, or going on the same path that we've been going on for decades, doing more of the same and seeing our bills go up and our reliability go down as we continue our dependence on out-of-state fossil fuels.
So what you're saying is that once you make those capital investments, it's like contracts. They're set in stone. The future commissions can't renege on those contracts.
Well, I mean, they can try, and the MAGA folks have certainly tried to use power to do what they can. But I have faith that once the ground is broken on these large scale solar power plants, once people see that their air is getting cleaner, their bill is going down, and the reliability is going up, that there would be just a citizen uproar if the commission flips and they say, "Oh no, we have to start increasing your bills and decreasing your reliability." I just don't see that as politically likely. So this is why this year is the decisive year for our energy future.
Was there any clean energy initiative at all in the past history of the commission before?
Yeah, so that's a great. So when I said that Arizona, maybe I didn't explain the history well enough. So about a quarter century ago, the Arizona Corporation Commission used to be a sleepy elected body where people would work, Democrats and Republicans would work together on the business, and it was a question of percent. Like, do we want to have an 8% rate increase or a 6% rate increase? Are we going to be putting the transmission lines here or here? And it was very much a technical working through the details rather than playing politics with our essential utilities. Arizona had one of the first in nation plans for achieving energy independence. It was a plan from the early 2000s to 2050 to achieve energy independence. And it was a bipartisan plan. It was signed off on by our stakeholders, so citizens, the utilities and the commission and the business community all signed off on this plan. And that's the plan that was revoked last year by the MAGA majority. They revoked it in a series of stages. First, they revoked the goals, and then they revoked the rules bit by bit that allowed the implementation of those goals. And the final bit of where they revoked that was when they revoked the efficiency standards that allowed the utilities to invest in people's homes and businesses to make them more efficient. So
So,
Arizona had a bipartisan plan that was efficiency and clean energy, and all of that has been revoked in the last 18 months.
so it was only a plan, but no capital investments made
No,
for
no, capital investments had been made, but not it was sort of we were on the bottom part of the curve, and we were about to make massive investments in this clean energy transition. And the MAGA majority saw that we were about to go from about 5% to about 50% over the next 10 years, and they stopped it in its tracks. They sort of well, I was going to use the metaphor that came to my mind is maybe a little too violent to say on a podcast like this. But they really stopped that transition in its tracks, and it can be restarted. And the thing that really frustrates me is we're not trying to do. Sorry, let me let the dog out.
okay.
Um, what we're doing is making a business case for why it is more affordable, a better use of our capital investments to make that transition to clean energy. And the Republicans don't really have a reply to that. They just say, oh, well, the way that things have been going in the past are how we should do things for another 50 years. And when I'm talking to voters on the trail, I'm talking to small business owners, I'm talking to large businesses, I'm talking to school boards, and they're saying, well, if the way that we did it in the past means that we're going to see our utilities go up 10% year on year for the future, that's just going to just bust our budgets, bust our family budgets, bust our business budgets, bust our school budgets. And there is a way to break that, and we have already seen the cost of clean energy in Arizona has been cheaper. New clean energy is cheaper than new fossil fuel infrastructure, and it's only going to get cheaper. Fossil fuel infrastructure will stay the same, and the price of the commodity to make that infrastructure work will only go up. But the cost of clean energy infrastructure is going down, and there's no cost. You don't have to pay for that sunshine. So we're just trying to make a business case saying, why aren't we doing the best thing for the people and the businesses of our state? And the Republicans don't really have an answer for us.
When you mentioned earlier that Arizona was on the brink of going from 5% to 50%, you mean like 50% clean energy. If the Republicans had on the commission had not stepped in to halt
Get in
that,
the way of those investments. Yeah.
yes, then Arizona would have been like Nevada. It would have gone from 5% clean energy to 50%.
Correct. Well, so Arizona, if you include the solar on top of people's homes and you include the hydroelectric power we have, we're actually closer to about 12% total. But of that, the percent that is utility scale, so the large scale, the most efficient projects We're only at about 5 to 8% depending on the day. And we could easily get to 50% within a decade, just like Nevada did. It's purely a question of political will and making sure we have the regulatory environment, a stable regulatory environment that incentivize investment in energy independence and clean energy in our state,
What
like
is
Nevada did, and Wyoming and Minnesota and Florida. I mean, the thing is like we're not talking like nobody wants to see what happened in Texas come to Arizona, where our over reliance on fossil fuels led to a grid meltdown under an extreme weather event and hundreds of people died. Nobody wants to see the California solution come to Arizona, where it was done through mandates and not markets. We want to make a market-based solution to get to our energy independence future. We're making a business case for it where it's cheaper, more reliable, and more secure, where we're not betting our future on a global commodities market. And nobody in Arizona, people come to Arizona because they don't want what's happening in Texas and they don't want what's happening in California. We want an Arizona future for Arizonans.
when you if you win and then the three of you win and are on the commission, will you be able to lower the rates for the consumers?
So depending on the rate case, we might be able to reopen some rate cases, but some rate cases are locked in. And what we can hold the line on the rate cases, there are some rate cases where there's still disputes going on and we could reopen them and have reconsideration. But if the rate case has been locked in, what we would do is work with that utility to bring down their costs and then have the utility have a new rate case where we can say, okay, you've brought down your costs. We can offer you a higher profit margin as long as you lower your price to the consumer. And that's what happened in Nevada. The cost to Nevada Power, because of the massive rollout in clean energy, have gone down. And so Nevada Power actually lowered their prices to the consumer, increased their profits, and had a total overall lower operating expense. And that's what we're hoping to bring to the people of Arizona. But that requires that we have actual leadership on the commission that's willing to do its constitutional duty, willing to work with the utilities, not for the utilities. The utilities are supposed to be our partners, not our bosses. Our bosses are the voters of Arizona. And the current Republican majority on the commission just doesn't seem to get it. It's kind of weird.
So you have a rural background. You grew up and then attended a rural school. Was that like among it was on a reservation, right?
Yeah. So I went to school with the Inuit in northern Alaska, the White Mountain Apache in White River, Arizona, the Shoshone Paiute in Hawaii, and in a mixed community with Diné, Hispanos, and Anglos in Aztec, New Mexico.
Are there any other candidates for the commission that have your rural background?
Not well, a little bit of a rural background. My one of my running mates, Elenia Aguilar, she grew up as a dreamer, and I think she went to 19. I should know her biography. 19 or 20 different schools because of the instability of being undocumented in the United States, including several rural schools, both in Arizona and Illinois. And so both of us have experience with that. And our third running mate, Jonathan Hill, who's a literal rocket scientist, he's an engineer with NASA. He was born in rural Western Arizona, but grew up primarily in the greater Phoenix area.
How does your rural background help you in understanding constituents and in this race and in the future? If you were to win the race, how would that background affect your decisions?
Yeah, well, in rural America, your political affiliation doesn't matter. Like it's really about the community needs to band together to make sure that things work. Because when things don't work, people die. And it doesn't matter if your neighbor is red, purple, or blue. you know, you know, somebody you see somebody in a snowstorm in rural Nevada, and they have a tire blowout, you pull over and you help them. Because you know, if you're in a whiteout blizzard and your spare is not there, and a neighbor doesn't come and help you, you know, you're gonna suffer. And people in rural Arizona, they don't care about the politics of this or that. They just want to make sure that their essential utilities are reliable and affordable. And it's a person, you know, it's something I've seen with personal experience, that this is a role that has a clear constitutional duty to get the best deal, for the people of Arizona, to have the strategic leadership to to get us through the next decades with our public utilities, and make sure that we're making the investments that are going to pay off 10 years, 20 years, 60 years down the road. And folks in rural Arizona just don't care. They want the electricity to work, and they want the roads to be good and the railways to run on time.
What about your work in the State Department? Did that work help you in this campaign, help you to understand the political climate and what the office entails, and how you should address these issues with your constituents?
Well, I've had a lot of people say, you know, aren't you afraid to go up against these big businesses? And I will say that, you know, after being on a Al Qaeda hit list in Iraq, and surviving a roadside bomb on the convoy I was in, I don't think, you know, somebody in a three-piece suit is going to be all that intimidating to me.
So all those your experience in the State Department has given you a lot more courage then, is what you're saying.
I would say it's given me the ability to look people in the eye. I've you know, I've had to sit in rooms with convicted war criminals, and negotiate for America's best interest. And I've had to look them in the eye and say that this is what America needs, you know, and you need to be ready to step up to the plate. And I think I am ready to have those hard-nosed negotiations, and to make the case, whether it's to the utilities, whether it's to the federal government, to say that this is Arizona's future. We're going to fight for that future. You can either get on board or get out of the way.
Do you have any business background?
Well, I have done some work when I was in the Foreign Service, where we did large scale commercial diplomacy. So where we worked with American companies, who are trying to get into the markets of the country that I happen to be serving in, and help them do business there. And the example that I'm most proud of, is when I was serving as the head of public affairs for the U.S. Embassy in Kingston. Um, Jamaica had been completely dependent, their entire electrical grid, on heavy fuel oil and one single large centralized power plant. And when that went down, the entire country went black. Um, and so they realized that their economic future meant that they needed to get to energy independence. And they put out a request for a proposal, and I helped American companies have the largest wind power plant and the largest solar power plant in the entire Caribbean be built in Jamaica, thanks to our efforts at commercial diplomacy.
Have you held other public offices before?
So I say that so my one of my running mates, Jonathan Hill, this is the first time he's run for office. I don't know about choosing to run statewide as your first race. My other running mate, Elenia Aguilar, her first office was right after she got her citizenship. She ran for school board. And she also happens to sit on, or not happens, but she has then since been elected to the water board in Maricopa County. where she is part of the statewide system that oversees our massive public works for water. And I'm sort of halfway in between. This is the second office I've ever run for. The first office was as my union representative in when I was in the State Department, and I was proud to say I was elected. We had a union dispute while I was serving as union representative, and we were able to successfully negotiate an end to that dispute in favor of labor. And so I am someone as a retired union member that I am very much grateful for the experiences in my time in the State Department and the experience that being a union member and an elected union representative have brought and the perspective it's given me in this race.
Did you decide to run for this office, or did someone encourage you?
Um, Well, it's a joke that Elenia makes, but she says, who's a 14-year-old who dreams up and says, when I'm 44, I want to run for Arizona Corporation Commissioner. To get serious for a moment, joking aside, this is a race where, as the father of a 10-year-old, and as a troop leader, a scout troop leader, I look into the eyes of the kids that I'm responsible for, whether it's my own child or my scouts, and I think that this is a race that has legacy implications. We are deciding whether Arizona is going to lead the way in addressing the energy and climate crisis in this state and make a model that the rest of the world can follow, and so that we can leave a legacy behind for these children that we can be proud of. And yeah, there were some people who encouraged me, but they encouraged me by saying, think about the legacy. Think about what you said that you did in 2024 and in 2025 and 2026 and 2027 and 2028. As I said earlier in the conversation, we are making a massive change. We are either on that part of that curve where it's about to accelerate exponentially, and we make the complete transition to energy independence in the state, or where out-of-state interests can take control of the regulators and stifle that change before it's able to take flight and keep us on a path of dependence and accelerating price increases.
Does your 10-year-old know why you are running? And does the 10-year-old understand the issues involved?
Oh, very much so. I would say my spouse is my closest political advisor. I've got a great team, but and I should probably, if it weren't unethical and illegal, I think I should pay for the uncompensated labor that my spouse is giving me in this race. But my 10-year-old also is one of my sharpest political critics. And so she watches my rallies, she watches my debates, and she gives me notes all the time. And she knows what's going on. And we have a very scout-led Girl Scout troop. And our troop decided that this year, the number one badge they wanted to pursue was called Inside Government. It's a civics badge, and they have decided that they are going to lobby the city council in Tucson on an issue that they feel passionate about. And so I told them that's great, but it's going to have to happen after the election. I can't help facilitate that. But they already have a spot on the calendar on, I want to say November 13th, where they're going to go to the city council meeting. They're all wearing their uniforms, and they're going to send their two representatives up there to lobby the city council on an issue that they're deeply passionate about.
For these major city councils, such as for Tucson, for Phoenix, what color are they?
Uh, you mean what's their partisan lean?
Yes.
Yes. So the major city councils in Arizona, most of them are controlled by Democrats. So you have a few like Mesa, where recently the mayor Giles stood up and he endorsed as a Republican, he endorsed Vice President Harris for the presidency. At the city council level, what you really see is you see Republicans who want to do their democratic and constitutional duty, Democrats who want to do their democratic and constitutional duty, and then MAGA people who are there for their own interests, who are there just to promote themselves politically. And so there's been a real sense of collaboration, bipartisan collaboration of what's left of the John McCain Republican Party with the Democrats to make our cities run, to make our counties run. And unfortunately, in a few counties, the MAGA folks have taken a majority, like they've done on the Corporation Commission, and they are undermining the very government bodies that they are elected to sit on.
Is the Democratic Party helping your campaign and your running mates' campaign? Are they providing any funding, well, and boots on the ground?
Yeah, so the Democratic Party is all in on our race for sort of funny campaign finance reasons. Um, the state party is focused on non-federal statewide races in Arizona, and we are the only non-federal statewide race. So there is a coordinated campaign for the congressional and Senate and presidential race that they are all working together, and then they have a strategic partnership with the state party. But we are the one statewide race that the state party is focused on this cycle, and they've provided an invaluable amount of support, logistical, financial, and political for this race. We were really grateful for what the Arizona Democratic Party is doing for us. But I'll also say that there have been many other groups. Obviously, organized labor has been an incredible supporter, but we have also seen that there have been a lot of independents and Republicans. You've heard about these Republicans for Harris groups or independents for Harris groups. We're also getting that support in our race because there are what I call constitutional Republicans who see what's going on in the Corporation Commission, and it's making them angry. I would say it's even making them pissed off. And so this is something that we are, really grateful to have support from across the political spectrum here in Arizona, where we are presenting a pro-democracy, pro-consumer, pro-constitutional political platform for the Corporation Commission, and that we're finding that that's getting us support from across the political spectrum.
Nonprofit organizations, 501(c)(3s, are not allowed to endorse political causes, but
Right.
trade organizations are allowed, the 501(c)(6s. Do you have any trade organizations helping you?
There's been a lot of support from across the spectrum. We are seeing to some degree that the energy companies, whether they're solar or transmission lines, they've decided that this is an important race, but they've decided that their best role is to invest in voter education, where they are educating the voters about what the commission does and then letting the voters decide, do we want more of the same? Do we want to drill baby drill our way out of the energy crisis in Arizona? Or do we want real leadership who understands the policy changes that we need to achieve affordable energy independence for the state? And they're letting the voters decide. I think most voters see it as a pretty clear choice.
And when you meet the voters, how much do they know already? How much do you have to explain to them?
Well, it depends on how recently they've seen their this month's electricity bill. And so in the spring when I first got into it, it was a lot harder. But the majority of voters in the state have seen a rate increase this year. And I tell you that the anger is palpable across the state, and that it is an anger that that crosses party lines. And so maybe about 40% of the people knew what was going on when I first started this race and knew what the race did. But now we're seeing 70-80% of the people at events know what the Corporation Commission is, and they want it to return to its constitutional duties of getting the best deal for the people of Arizona, not getting the best deal for the utilities.
Are you able to gauge whether the organizations that try to educate the voters, is their message getting across?
I mean, I think so, but I have it's anecdotal evidence. We can't coordinate with what they're doing. Their operations are separate from ours. But I've definitely heard people on the trail use some of the language that is coming across, which is great. Um, the corporation, the corporation commission, they're the ones that voted for your rate increase, not the utility. And so when I hear that language, I'm like, this person, they've been educated. They know how our constitution works in this state.
Mhm. And the rate increases are going to the utilities?
Well, so the utilities goes before the commission asks for a rate increase, and the commission decides how big that rate increase is going to be,
Right.
and then votes on it on a majority level. And it's been a 4-1 MAGA majority vote for the last 2 years.
So it is the utilities that are requesting the rate hikes then, and they're getting the profits.
Yep.
Mm,
The profits go to them. They
right.
ask for the rate increase, and the corporate commission decides how big it's going to be and then votes on it.
Mm.
And then those profits go to the utilities and leave our state.
Yes, and but you're saying that if you go with clean energy, if Arizona goes with clean energy, the utilities profits actually could increase, and then the rates could go down as well for the consumers.
Right. And that's a deal that some other states have made with the utilities that if you can lower the cost, we'll give you a higher marginal profit. And that's, a lot of utilities have taken that deal. Where if they can get a 12% profit off of $100 million investment that gives you the same amount of electricity, versus a 10% profit off of a $200 million fossil fuel investment that gets you the same amount of electricity. They would rather have lower costs and get 15% of 100 million rather than 10% of 200 million.
Mhm.
And I hate for people to do math, but that's the difference between having $100 million in costs and $15 million in profits, or $200 million in costs and $20 million in profits. And
Josh,
under the current rules in Arizona, they only have the second option. If they're going to be rational corporate actors, it only makes sense for them to invest in the more expensive thing because that's how they maximize their profit.
could you explain that a little further?
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's getting into super nerdy energy accounting policy. But basically, in Arizona, our utilities make their money not by delivering electricity to the consumers and the businesses. They make their profit by getting a rate of return on their capital investments. So if they need to build 100 megawatts of electricity generation, and it costs them $200 million to build a fossil fuel power plant to deliver that 100 megawatts, they get $20 million in profit. And then, because under our current rules, any of the operating expenses of that plant, especially the fuel costs, get passed directly onto the consumer, and the consumer reimburses the utilities for that. A similar power plant with solar energy and batteries cost about $180 million. And so your profit's only going to be 18 million, and then there's very little operating costs to pass on to the consumers. So all the consumer cares about is the bill that they get in the end, right? They don't care if those electrons are coming from a glorified 19th century steam engine powered by fossil fuels, or if it's coming from a 21st century solar panel with batteries. They just want those when they flip their lights on, they turn their AC on. They just want it to work. And in one case, the utility gets $18 million in profit. These are real world figures I'm giving you. They get $18 million in profit from the solar battery project, or they get $20 million in profit from the fossil fuel project. That's a perverse incentive that needs to be reformed because in the lifetime cost of energy, one, it's already going to be more expensive for the fossil fuels, but two, the consumers have to reimburse the utilities for the fossil fuels to make that turbine spin. And they're not reimbursing the utilities for the cost of the sunshine to make the solar panels work because there is no cost for the sunshine.
Got it.
You think I explained it? It's super nerdy. It's hard to get into, and it's hard when when I'm on an energy nerd podcast, we can really get into like fuel reimbursement surcharges and P&L pass-throughs and things. But it's hard to get through on a general interest podcast. So I hope I did a good job. I think this is one of my big failings as a candidate is it's a really nerdy, complicated thing, and explaining it to the consumers is it's not something you can really do when you've only got 90 seconds when you're knocking on somebody's door.
What does P&L represent?
Oh, so profit and loss. So with the fuel rebate surcharge, instead of the cost of buying this wholesale coal and gas going impacting their profit and loss, it instead gets passed directly onto the consumer as a rebate and doesn't impact their profits.
Got it. Joshua Polachek, if our listeners want to learn more about you, where should
Yeah.
they?
Oh, so you can find me on not all the socials. I'm too old for TikTok, or maybe not quite old enough. But you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Joshua for Arizona. You can find me on the platform formerly known as Twitter at Joshua Polachek. I believe I'm the only Joshua Polachek on the platforms. You can go to my website at Joshua for Arizona, either Joshua FOR Arizona.com or Joshua number 4 Arizona.com. They both work. And you can come to events. We are all over the state. As I said, I've been to all 15 counties, many more than once. And I will be continuing to put hundreds of miles, if not thousands of miles, on my car, getting around the state and making sure that the people of Arizona hear this message of affordability, reliability, and security.
So I guess, Joshua, you have to give up your regular job now to work on the campaign. It's a 24/7 endeavor.
100%. And the other thing I want to really stress is make sure that people, especially your listeners who are here in Arizona, know that they get 3 votes for the Corporation Commission, and that they can go to AguilarForArizona.com to learn more about Eleni Aguilar, and vote Hill to learn more about Jonathan Hill, our third running mate. So we want to make sure that people know that they've got the power to change things. And if they use that power, things will change. And I promise we are going to make the things better for the people in Arizona, especially on utilities. And I've got one final promise to deliver to your listeners. Arizona has not finished electrification. There are tens of thousands of Arizona citizens, primarily people living on the indigenous nations of the state, who are without the grid. And I want to make a promise that we are going to use our power to deliver access to everyone who wants it, grid access to everyone who wants it by 2035.
All right. Thank you so much, Joshua, for joining us on WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM today. And good luck on your election.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
And make sure, even if you're in a solid blue state like Illinois, make sure you vote. You got to keep your voters accountable, or you got to keep your politicians accountable. They work for you. You don't work for them.
Right. And send over all the links for your socials as well, and your
Of course, yeah.
and the websites for you and your running mates.
Of course.
Oh, one more question I did want to ask. If there were a tie, it's like the top 3. If there were a tie, then how does it how is it resolved if there were any ties?
Well, with over 3 million, we're expecting maybe 3.3 to 3.2 to 3.4 million votes cast. The chance that there be a tie among those millions of votes is highly, highly unlikely. And I actually don't know the tie procedures in Arizona. And because it's a 5-member commission, there's going to be a majority for either party after this election.
Yes. Well, I wasn't exactly tie per se, but if it were close enough, and then maybe one of the candidates were to ask for a runoff or something, would they be able to ask for that if it were like maybe only a couple of hundred votes apart?
Well, there are procedures for automatic vote recounts. And this is something else that it's sad that we're at this stage in the American political experiment. But I am prepared to accept the results of the election, regardless of what the results are, whether I win or lose. And I'm not sure that my opponents feel the same way and could make that same public pledge. I have challenged them in public debates about to publicly state that they accept the results of the 2020 and the 2022 elections, and they have refused to do so.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joshua Polachek, for Arizona Corporation Commission.
Yep. Thank you so much, and thanks to all your listeners.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.